Ask Dan Schneider. It's been a while since my last Ask Dan Schneider. I've been busy with a lot of the interviews for the Dan Schneider video interview series as drama. But I wanted to do one more Ask Dan Schneider, at least before the holidays, because I've gotten many emails asking me for my comments on the recent American presidential election. One of the questions came from, I think it's a female writer called Anna PTX83 at gmail.com, I believe that is. And she asked basically, what happens if Trump wins? What will happen to the rights of women, minorities, and gays? And this was a question that's been sitting in my email box for quite a few weeks from actually before the election. So I want to thank Anna for her question. Let me just say that I'm not as worried with Trump as I was, say, 16 years ago with George W. Bush, because whatever you want to say for Trump, and I could say a lot of things. I think he's a scumbag. He got his start with the American mafia and his rich father. I disliked him from the get-go as a young man for the same reason I disliked Muhammad Ali for his indebtedness to the American mafia, a bunch of killers and scumbags and whatnot. Having said that, Donald Trump, like him or not, is a lot smarter than George W. Bush was. So I don't think that he's going to be as bad. He's also someone who's a total narcissist, and he's already in the couple of weeks since the election gone back on a lot of his promises, things such as the building of a wall to keep Mexicans out, going after Hillary Clinton for her email scandal and whatnot. He has nominated some whack jobs here or there, but we had a lot of Democratic and left-wing loonies in the original Clinton administration too. So that's a given. I myself voted for Jill Stein. I think anyone who votes for the duopoly of the Republicans and the Democrats is voting for the same thing. They are voting for more of the same. This was an election between a monster and a monster, so a monster had to win. So you either had a choice to vote for a third party or sit out the election. Hillary Clinton basically rigged her own nomination in the ironically named Democratic Party. It reminded me of the late 1980s when I was a young man and I was working on the campaign of David Dinkins to win the mayoralty of New York City as the first black mayor in the late 80s. And the club that I was associated with, the Ridgewood Democratic Club, backed the corrupt Ed Koch without even taking a vote. Hillary similarly rigged the game against Sanders, who I'm not particularly high on either. But, in doing so, she totally muted the voice of liberals, true liberals, not left-wing fanatics. And Trump, his stupidity, has been well documented. Having said that, to get to the meat of the matter, what does a Trump presidency mean for things? And I'm not even going to get into the electoral college thing. The electoral college is a lot of bullshit, but it's something we're stuck with, and probably there's not going to be enough motivation to get rid of it. But what does a Trump presidency mean for the rights of women? And then I'll talk about minorities and gays. Well, people have said, well, he's talking about grabbing pussies and this and that. And it's silly, it's juvenile and whatnot. But let's face some facts. Bill Clinton was every bit as much of a pervert and a fornicator and an adulterer as Donald Trump was, and people didn't give a shit about that, at least on the Democratic side, because he was one of theirs. And this is one of the things that has to stop. People just supporting people because they agree with a small spectrum of their beliefs. Having said that, I'm sure Trump has already nominated a few women for prestige positions like the UN ambassador and whatnot. So this idea that women are suddenly going to, go backwards, and you'll watch in the next few weeks, Trump will reverse his position on abortion. Trump is what's known as a Rockefeller Republican. He's a liberal limousine, liberal Republican, much more in the Rockefeller and John Lindsay manner. He's from New York. He's not going to try to even roll back abortion rights. He might throw an additional right-wing nut onto the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court has been screwed for the last almost 40 years since Ronald Reagan took office. Having said that, the far left is all hysterical. They talk about all this crap, rape culture stuff, even though this country is not an Islamic country. This isn't Brazil or South America where revenge killings or honor killings against women if they fornicate or do this is around, or where rape is looked the other way. And that kind of talk, the talk from the left, has been as disturbing, if not more so than that from the right, since a liberal should know better if they call themselves a liberal. We live in the most peaceful times in known human history. Steven Pinker wrote about this a few years ago in some books and some lectures, and it's absolutely true, despite some people thinking that the numbers don't jibe, but it actually does. We are, in America especially, we have far less violent crimes, whether it's rape, sexual abuse, murder, carjackings, terrorism, etc., than we did back in the 1970s. That's simply a fact. I don't see that changing one way or the other under a President Trump, whether he's there for 4 or 8 years. On to minorities. Again, he's already backed off the Mexican wall stuff. He may throw a bone here or there to the troglodyte, right? But pretty much Trump has always been pretty good in dealing in his personal and business affairs with minority people, especially since he's been in show business and been in professional sports. The idea that blacks are going to suffer something greatly, even if they take a minor step back, the gains made during the Obama administration will remain. Even Obamacare, which is, I think, a far bigger issue than what Trump will do for any particular group. Obamacare, which will affect just about everyone of a certain income level, is going to basically remain the same. There'll be some tweaks, some bones thrown to Republicans. They will keep the thing about not being able to toss people out if they have a pre-existing condition and whatnot. So I don't really see much on that. The stuff on gay rights, again, Trump is a product of Hollywood. He's a narcissist. He is not going to even attempt to stack the court or to reverse gay rights stuff. This is something that the far right will go after him with a vengeance, and they will probably try to impeach him more quickly than the left will. So those are my opinions on the election in general, and I would say that it's not going to be nearly as bad as people think. And there probably will be some people who will say, he might not have, they might not think he's a good president, but say, he was probably the best Republican president since Richard Nixon. And for people who would scratch their heads at that, Richard Nixon, yes, he was a psychotic, and yes, he doubled down on Vietnam and got another 30,000 Americans killed, and yes, he tried to topple the American jurisprudence system with his Watergate, the break-in stuff. But the reality is that the old saying was that LBJ may have started the Great Society, but Nixon funded it. And I've got a feeling that Donald Trump is going to continue a lot of the midline mainstream programs and stuff that Obama did. And Obama himself, while he's probably the best president of my lifetime, was still a mediocrity. He had a chance to close Guantanamo Bay. He had a chance to go card check for the unions and a number of other things like the TPP agreement. Donald Trump is going to kill that. And that's actually a very, very good thing and one of Obama's biggest mistakes and a stain on his legacy. So do I think Obama will be a good, or rather Trump will be a good president? Absolutely not. Do I think he's going to be a disaster in the mold of W. or Ronald Reagan or the Nixon presidency, even despite its good social stances? No, I think he's going to be a mediocrity, and he may be a one-term president along the lines of George Bush Sr. So that's my opinion.